and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. And I guess, first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the April 6th meeting. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any comments or changes or amendments? No? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is the first selectmen's update. Let me see if I can get this right today. So just real quickly, I think I announced on Friday that, Madison has done very well in terms of getting our residents vaccinated, or our residents are doing a good job of getting themselves vaccinated, I should say. And we rank currently number 5 in the state. And that's as of actually April 14th. They haven't updated the data recently, but we have 68% of our total population has at least received a first dose. So, and I just hats off and accolades again to our health department and our senior center and our beach and rec department, which has been working the clinics locally. The senior center has done an incredible job reaching out to the community, assisting people getting registered, helping them find places to get vaccinated. I think it's just been, we've been grateful we've been able to do so much. Pretty much all our teachers who want to be vaccinated have been vaccinated, childcare providers, and town staff. Pretty much all of our town staff now who have wanted to get vaccinated have at least received 1 dose, and many are fully vaccinated at this stage. So with that, and kind of what has been a little bit of a respite in demand, we are pausing our vaccination clinic at the town campus gym for first doses. If you do have a dose scheduled for a second dose, that clinic will still continue. I think our hope was to shift to the J&J vaccine so that because once you do 1 dose, then you have to commit to vaccinate the person for the second dose. And so we're kind of trying to figure out if we want to restart the clinic again using J&J, or if we want to do something alternative. As everybody knows, the state of emergency declaration expires May 20th for the governor, and pretty much most restrictions are going to be lifted at that point. Last week, Governor Lamont did announce that most of the business restrictions are going to be lifted by May 19th. And so the town is continuing to kind of evaluate and update its policies as a result of the public health emergency. And that will include going to 5 days a week by the end of May. Currently, right now, town campus is open 3 days a week by appointment. And on Mondays and Wednesdays, it is just open to the public. So you do not need an appointment on Monday and Wednesdays. And we'll be anticipating that moving to 5 days a week. And I hope to announce the details of all that by the end of this week. We're also finalizing our room rental policies. We're still trying to figure out, any cleaning protocols or social distancing things that we might want to still implement over the summer before we kind of make any commitments to. I know a lot of people have been interested in getting back into our facilities. And then I didn't put on the slide here, but the other thing is our board and commission meetings. And we'll be sending out some announcements in early May about how those meetings would be moving back to in-person with a hybrid option. And we're working through a lot of that right now. I think the expectation is that the state legislature will be revising or attempting to update FOIA to include hybrid meetings. But right now, as of May 20th, we'll basically be going back to what we were pre-pandemic, which is in-person meetings. So we're going to try to notify boards and commissions, talk about room usage and room schedules soon. And some rooms right now are not available to have hybrid meetings offered. But when we can offer it, we are going to try to and eventually make that an option for all our boards and commissions. So that's something that we're working on. And then I guess just as an update to the public The Board of Finance is holding its public hearing on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. The link's on the town website to make a final recommendation on the 2022 budget. And the referendum is scheduled for May 18th, Tuesday, May 18th, and you can vote absentee ballot or in person. And I do want to highlight that we are going to be continuing to use Polson for District 1 for this next referendum. And then District 2 will still be at Brown School. So you'll vote similar as you did during the November election period. So with that, that is kind of my quick update. And I will turn it over to any kind of liaison reports from board members and comments.
Well, many of us just came from the library event, which was in testament to our wonderful and experienced library building committee. Two of the members are actually, unfortunately, leaving town. And I think there was a really lovely ceremony for them and for the entire library in sort of dedication. The library director spoke, the board of trustees president spoke, and the chairman of the building committee spoke and did a very eloquent top 15, like in David Letterman style, which was rather fun, I have to admit. And it was great to see all the faces, albeit in masks, but I think, there was a lot of hard work and effort that went into building this library, and the experience of that particular board was just unbelievable. And we owe them a ton of thanks. It was really well done. And so that was that event.
No, that was definitely a nice event, and a number of us attended that, and it was just great to have an event in person, I think, and talk to people live. I mean,
it was.
So we all kind of felt funny about that, but it was masked, but it was definitely nice to start
masked and outdoors.
And masked and outdoors.
Yeah.
But it was a nice event. Anybody else?
So I've got a few things actually. It is Beach Pass season. Beach passes are for sale online and by mail, and on May 3rd, you'll be able to get your beach pass at the surf club. So that's exciting, and just want to remind everybody who is going to try to put it off until the very last minute that Memorial Day that's the first weekend during the weekends that we are going to be expecting cars to have beach parking passes on them. And then there'll be some sporadic weekends before it turns over to full-time later in June. So don't delay.
I saw yours on your car, by the way. Very well done.
Online, it worked without a hitch. I think I did it on a Friday, and by Tuesday I had the sticker. So they're doing a great job, and the stickers are green this year. We had yellow last year, green this year, so maybe red next year. I don't know. It could be the stop sign, the stoplight. The Ambulance Association has two fundraisers going on right now. They have had for quite a while a flag purchase program where you can purchase a flag and assorted kit directly from them. They've got a couple of sizes that they stock, but if there's a size up for your flagpole that they don't stock, they'll go out and get it for you. So if you go to Amazon to buy your flag, you can go to the Madison ctems.org website, and you can get an American-made flag directly from them and fly the colors and help out the Ambulance Association. The second fundraiser is actually kind of neat and a little bit of a revival of an old-time fundraiser. They're putting together a community recipe book, and for $25, you can submit a recipe to be in a book that they will publish later this year, and forever in time be able to claim that that's your recipe, and that anybody else who makes it is making your recipe. So I think that's a wonderful thing. It's been done in the past many, many years ago. So please, again, check out the Madison ctems.org website to participate in that. EDC, a couple of things at EDC. They received a preliminary presentation from a wireless broadband service provider. So this is a company that provides equipment with the idea of blanketing either a geographic area or an entire town in Wi-Fi, high-speed Wi-Fi. And I found this to be interesting, especially in light of the fact that the president is encouraging municipalities to look at expanding Wi-Fi. And I believe even the governor is looking at initiatives to do that. So I think that'll be something to stay tuned for. It was a very, very brief presentation, more in concept than anything else. They also discussed the funds that are likely to be coming to the town and possible uses for that. Peggy, I saw that the governor released some more details on that today, but just literally hours ago. So I don't know if there's much more to talk about there other than there are going to be funds coming to the town, and I think that's great. And the EDC is already thinking about recommendations they can make to us about how we might best put those funds to use. And then the last thing that I wanted to bring up tonight is really kind of a long-term topic I think that this board should consider. In following state legislation, one of the things that looks like, if it doesn't happen this session, it's probably going to happen in one of the very next sessions, and that is marijuana for recreational purposes. You know, we've seen Massachusetts do it. We've just seen New York do it. I think it's really a matter of time before Connecticut comes up with some form of recreational marijuana. And I'd like to encourage the idea that we create a panel, we identify stakeholders in the community, and we charge them with monitoring the progress of the legislation and working on what it looks like for us as a community, the things that we should be thinking about addressing. And I think when I say stakeholders, right, the first thing that comes to mind is youth and family services, the school district, public health, the police or the police commission. And I think there's also a business aspect to it, right? Because there's going to be some sort of retail sale of marijuana. So I'm not judging the goodness or the badness of the event. I'm just acknowledging that I think it's going to happen, and we have an opportunity with a lot of runway, a lot of time, I believe, to start to become prepared for what that day looks like when it does happen. So nothing actionable in that. I think it's a topic for us to explore in subsequent meetings, and hope that that's something we can do.
Maybe that topic too, Bruce, is something that, and I know we don't have it as an item on our agenda to discuss tonight, but you know, maybe it's something that we first explore with, you know, and as I'm the liaison of Madison Youth and Family Services, we can talk to them first, maybe about, you know, things that they're already doing and things that they're already been thinking about. You know, they obviously have members of the police and community members already involved in Madison Youth and Family Services with a very big focus on substance abuse. So just building on your idea here. So maybe a first step as opposed to a second.
I absolutely agree that there, you know, certainly Scott Cochran is already well educated, has been thinking about this, and will be full of great ideas for it. So I think, you know, again, I think we have a lot of time to do this. I don't think there's any real urgency. But it's a nice opportunity for us to look forward and anticipate a change rather than be forced to react to it.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of ways this will touch the town and society in general, but there's also a lot of the devils in the details in terms of how it's going to be managed from a regulatory standpoint. And so there's going to be a lot of discussions on how we implement and if it happens, you know, it's as you said, it's kind of moving in that direction, but we'll have to see how it all kind of shakes out, and then figure out how the town is prepared for that, as well as the community in general.
Absolutely.
And education is always a very important in something like this. So any other selectmen comments?
The Board of Police Commissioners, there's some news. The commissioners were delighted to hear, and I'm sure the community will be delighted to hear, that the Madison Police Department has once again achieved a voluntary accreditation from the Commission on the Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies, known as CALEA. We're one of the very few police departments in New England, and in fact throughout the United States, that it has achieved this voluntary accreditation. And especially interesting is we also achieved a second accreditation for our dispatch center. And it makes us quite unique in that we have the dual accreditations. Very few organizations are able to attain and achieve both of the accreditations. So that's a real compliment and a real indicator of the excellence of the Madison Police Department.
Amazing.
Yeah, I know that it is kind of held as an example for the state, and a lot of the recent changes in legislations requiring, from training to organizational issues with police departments. The Madison Police has already been doing that for many years, and is an example to a lot of towns throughout the state about kind of setting that blueprint and that bar for other communities to reach for. So we're very proud of that. And congratulations to them. Any other comments? Nope. Okay. Any citizens' comments, Lauren?
We got a few on today.
Yeah.
69 people today. Wow. Good stuff.
Aaron Burris is first. Aaron, you can go ahead and unmute and then give your comment.
Yeah, I don't, hold on, sorry. Jesus. So I'm not sure we were ready to comment on those items.
You can comment on anything. It doesn't have to be those items.
I got it. Hold on, sorry, can you repeat that?
You can comment on anything.
Okay. So we're here today to just be contribute to the discussion about the resiliency plan. You guys haven't brought it up as an issue, so I'm not sure that this is the appropriate time, but happy to talk about it.
So it is further on the agenda. You can make your comments now or at the end of the meeting. There's also a section for public comment. So, sometimes you might want to hear the discussion and then make your comments at the end of the meeting, but then that means you have to sit through the whole meeting. So I leave it to you.
Yeah. So I think we'd like to hear what you guys have to say first before we contribute to the discussion.
Very good.
I'm going to lower your hand then. When you're ready to give public comment, you can raise it again. Larry Lawrence.
Hi, thanks. I've spoken with a couple of you individually. I know you've seen a ton of comments from various quarters about the recommendations of the Resiliency Commission that you're going to be looking at today. And I just like to sort of quickly and publicly kind of frame our views. I'm a part of a rapidly growing now group of residents that have deep concerns about the impact of implementing these proposed changes. Our petition site is just sort of past the 900 signature mark and is growing steadily. But in brief, it's the combination of a 5-year look back, the inclusion of routine repairs and the calculation of cost as applied to the 50% hurdle, what we think is an artificially low measure of structure value based on tax assessment allocation rather than on an independent appraisal of replacement cost. And then what we're finding is really the prohibitive cost of even thinking about raising houses in the shoreline area. That the combination of those things feels effectively almost like a condemnation or a mandatory condemnation of a lot of those structures. And we don't understand, what the real legal basis for it is. We don't understand what the benefits to the town are. We understand much better the burdens that we think would be placed on citizens to try to comply with it. So I know you haven't really considered it yet, and I'm just asking on behalf of myself as a resident, on behalf of our group, that you give very careful consideration to the practical impact of all of these things taken together, and that you think also, as I know we've said in our letter to you, you think about the infrastructure issues, which we think might be a better way of addressing the resiliency issues than imposing these kinds of burdens on exclusively on homeowners. So anyway, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the work you guys are doing, and appreciate the opportunity to let you know what our point of view is in a public way. I know you're all pretty familiar with the issues. So anyway, thank you for this opportunity.
No one else has their hand raised.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I keep finding myself muted. I'm having all kinds of computer problems tonight, including my virtual background. So excuse my messy guest bedroom. So I'll move on to the next item. And as I said, I know there's a lot of people watching. There will be an opportunity to provide public comment at the end of the meeting also, for those who want to weigh on some of the issues on the agenda. So item number 6 is discuss feedback from town staff regarding recommended amendments to the town's floodplain ordinance from the Coastal Resiliency Commission. And I will, from this point on, hand this over to Scott Murphy. As I think many members of the public know, I'm recusing myself from the deliberations and voting on this issue. My husband and I own a property that is in the flood zone and will be impacted by this proposed changes to the ordinance. So I'll be recusing myself. And so I will turn the virtual gavel over to Scott Murphy. All right.
Thanks, Peggy. So I appreciate the opportunity here to, as we're exploring the conversation around our floodplain ordinance and the recommendations coming back from the Coastal Resiliency Committee, we thought it would be an important opportunity to hear from our town staff. Specifically tonight, we have 2 members of our town staff that will join us. So first is John Iannacco, who's our town engineer and director of public works. And then Vinny Garofalo, who is our building official. And so I think what we'll do in framing the conversation here is, obviously this is a discussion item tonight. We're not meant to take any action specifically around the recommendations from the Coastal Resiliency Committee. But I'd turn it over to John. Maybe we'll start with you, if that's okay, to provide your thoughts, ideas, recommendations, observations on what has come forward from the Coastal Resiliency Commission. So I'll turn it over to you, John.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So, my role in this, I administer, along with the building official, I administer the flood ordinance, floodplain management ordinance. And so I'm very familiar with the existing ordinance. The new ordinance, the main really changes that are required on this from the state are to match the building code, the latest building code standards. So, really the primary things with the building code is that the requirement to have an additional 1 foot of freeboard, or basically a safety factor above that base flood elevation for whatever zone your property is in, or the other main change with the building code that we need to match is the requirement for coastal A zones to be treated similar to V zones in terms of the construction requirements. So I took a look at the revised ordinance prepared by the Coastal Resilience Commission, and my point of view on this really is from an administrator perspective, and reading through the language and kind of making sure that the mechanics are clear in terms of how we're going to administer the ordinance, and that there aren't things that are vague or difficult to interpret. So, I had a few comments. I know I got that to the board very mid-afternoon, so I'm sure you haven't had a chance to review these, but I commented on 5 different sections on the ordinance, and I don't know how you want to do this. If you want me to just kind of highlight each of the 5 sections and what my thoughts were, does that make sense?
Why don't you just sort of take us through? I mean, you don't have to go through every detail, John, but maybe just kind of give us the drive-by of your thoughts and observations, and if there's anything important that we should be considering in our conversations and deliberations here.
Okay, so the first section that I had comments on is the definition section, and there were like 20 or so. There are many definitions in the section. I just had comments on 3 of those definitions, and one is market value. The revised ordinance is proposing to use the market value, I guess it was saying the appraised value, as published on the grand list. And I just changed the language, or I'm suggesting revising the language slightly there to not refer to the grand list, because the grand list really only publishes the assessed value, the total assessed value of each property, and doesn't have the breakdown of appraised value for each of the different components, which is building. I'm probably going into too much detail, but it's kind of important. So the building, accessory buildings, land, other accessory features like pools and patios and things like that are all broken down on the assessor's field card, which is the way we've always, it's the method that we've used for determining market value of a structure. So I'm just proposing revising the language slightly in there to refer to the assessor's field card at the time of the latest revaluation, as of the date an application comes in. And so that's something to consider. From my perspective, in order to administer this ordinance, we need to have a clear way of basing the market value, and this is very common in other towns to use appraised value. The municipality's appraised value as a basis for market value. So the second definition that I
Aaron, looks like you're trying to ask a question. You're on mute.
Can I ask a question, or do you want me to wait till the end?
No, go ahead. I mean, if it's relevant to the point he just made, go for it.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, first, just so I'm clear, the state building code standards, John, are those like a best practices guidance kind of thing for towns to model their
the state?
How does that work?
So Vinny can chime in here if I have this wrong. He's very familiar with the state building codes. So the state building codes are, they're mandatory requirement for any kind of building construction, and they also get into structures within flood zones. So there's an overlap there between the building code and the floodplain management ordinance. And so in 2018, the state provided the municipalities with a model ordinance and said, you know, the towns need to update your floodplain management ordinance so that it doesn't contradicts anything in the building code. And so there are a couple of items in the state building code that were actually more stringent than the floodplain ordinance, which is, you know, whether we modify the ordinance or not, these things would have to be done in order to meet building code when building permits are, you know, come into the office. But this is just to provide consistency between what it says in the building code and what it says in the floodplain management ordinance. Is that what you're looking for? Or?
Yeah, I was just trying to understand how they work together, and whether it was mandatory or guidance or how that was.
It is mandatory, and what the model ordinance that the state provided, actually they highlighted the areas that needed to be incorporated into the floodplain ordinance in order to be consistent with the building code, the state building code. So, you know, there's also a lot of, there's more sort of detail in the model ordinance, which is the basis for this document that the CRC came up with. And, but there are certainly things that have to be incorporated in the model ordinance in order to be consistent with the building code.
Okay.
So John, if I could follow up, I just want to make sure I've got this right. Our current ordinance here in Madison, which dates back some years, calls for the base flood elevation has to be met. The current state building code is the base elevation plus 1 foot. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So our town ordinance is currently in conflict with the mandatory state building code.
It is in conflict with that. So when we write permits, we make sure that the requirement in the permit conditions is that, you know, if a home is being elevated, that it needs to be elevated by the base flood elevation plus 1 foot. And that's just to be consistent or to be in compliance with the building code.
Thank you.
It sounds like a pretty important point there, just in terms of consistency. You know, because if we're not in compliance, if we're in conflict with the state building code, I would think that would cause an inherent kink in the system.
Yes, somewhat. I mean, it's so, you know, it's not unheard of to have regulations that may, you know, conflict with each other in terms of, you know, another area of review is more stringent, and the more stringent guideline or regulation needs to govern here. So, but it does make sense to revise the ordinance and make this consistent, and, you know, eliminate that confusion.
So just to finish my point, our Coastal Resiliency Commission has recommended to us a base foot elevation plus 2 feet.
In certain zones, that's correct. So in coastal A zones and V zones, and those are right along the shoreline for structures that would need to be elevated on piers, essentially. So that's what the proposal is in the ordinance.
Why don't you keep going with the rest of your feedback unless there's other questions here?
I have one more question.
Yeah, go
about
ahead.
The idea of the appraised value of the structure. Do you have any thoughts on, as an alternative to what you've proposed, on having an independent appraisal being submitted to the town from the perspective of accuracy, or even how that, you know, whether that would be difficult to administer from your point of view? I didn't know if you had any opinion on that.
Yeah. So, you know, we've always used the appraised value in the town of Madison as far as I know, and certainly for the last 15 years or so. I know that independent appraisals are allowed in certain communities. My gut reaction is it will certainly make things probably more difficult to administer. Just getting independent appraisals from various sources or appraisers, as opposed to using one consistent basis for determining market value. If FEMA and the NFIP program is really silent on how you define how a community defines market value.
Right.
And so I think this is probably a common way of doing it just because it's out of simplicity. And I think that's important to have a good ordinance and be able to follow it and administer it consistently and fairly. But like I said, my point of view is I want to be able to administer this and not have difficulty interpreting the ordinance. So yeah, that's something that is an option, I suppose.
John, do you have a sense, with our surrounding shoreline towns or other towns using the same appraised value and approach as opposed to, an independent market value?
I don't have the data on that, Scott, and how many towns are using appraised value, towns appraised value versus independent appraisals. I believe that's less common, but I don't have the data.
That's fine. All right, why don't we keep rolling unless others have questions here with, look what you started, Aaron.
Okay, so the next definition is substantial.
Yeah, absolutely.
Substantial improvement. I think this was just a carryover from the prior version of the CRC's revised ordinance, where they left a line in there that referred to excluding substantial improvement definition to projects prior to 2018, and that's when the CRC was considering really going retroactive with the new look back period that they're proposing. And since now they have revised that, the intent is not to go retroactive with the revised look back period. This line can just come out, and I think that was just a leftover. And then I skipped the very first definition, look back period, which is a definition that was added by the CRC. And I'm just asking, I have a comment in there. I'm just kind of asking for some clarification to make sure I understand what is what this is saying and what the intent of this look back period definition is. I think what they're saying is in 2023, it's going to go from a 1-year look back period like we do now to a 5-year look back period going forward with, and it's sort of a clean break, so that permits that are submitted prior to that 2023 date would not be considered in the cumulative cost of construction going forward. So essentially on July 1st, 2023, as this is written, we would start collecting permits and tracking the cost of construction in that 5-year period to determine if and when it reaches that 50% threshold or so-called substantial improvement, which is again, probably too much detail, but those are the three definitions that I had comments on. So
just to be clear, my understanding is, and maybe we can all just make sure we're on the same page on this one, but the recommendation coming back was the 5-year look back wouldn't actually get to be a 5-year look back until basically year 8, assuming we're starting it from now. So in 2023, you would start with a 0 look back, then a 1-year look back, then a 2-year look back, then a 3-year look back, until you got to year 5.
Yes, I think you're right. And I think that's just a different way of stating it, because really, and I don't look at it so much as a look back period. I look at it as a permit comes in, and say it's the first permit, within the last couple decades, then from that time on, we need to start tracking the cost of construction or improvements on the structure. And in this case, it'll be for 5 years. So, but I think that's just another way of stating it. You could say, the full 5-year look back period starts in 2028, meaning a permit that comes in on 2028, you're going to consider that permit, and you're going to also be considering all permits received from starting back from the prior 5 years. If
you have a sense, we've gotten a ton of public feedback. Certainly, we have a a survey that's out there, or a petition that's out there as well. But we've gotten a lot of feedback on look back. Do you have any sense, as we deliberate on this one, whether a 5-year look back, or a 1-year look back, or a 3-year look back, what's more common? Do you have any guidance for us in your experience?
Well, so again, I don't have the data in front of me, but I'm on the look back period. 1 year is much less common. I think it's just might be 2 towns. Vinny may know, but in the 5-year look back, I think is pretty common. And then other towns have more than 5 years. So I don't have the data at my fingertips here, but I believe my sense is that 5 years is pretty common. Probably might even be the most common look back period that's used.
Okay.
John, one of the things that I've struggled with as we've moved through this is the notion of substantial improvement, which is a defined term, and then just the common sense normal maintenance of a structure, of a property. So in this definition, it actually speaks to what substantial improvement is. It says the alteration of any wall, ceiling, floor, or other structural part of the building, right? I wouldn't consider painting to be meeting that criteria. I wouldn't consider even replacing windows or replacing shingles on the roof to be part of that, because they're not altering the structure. They're simply maintaining the envelope. But what we've heard is all of those things would, in the cumulative, count as substantial improvement. So do you have any commentary on that, so you can help me close the gap on those 2 thoughts?
Well, so what I know is that the town of Madison has always considered virtually everything you do on a structure is included in the cumulative cost of construction, with a few exceptions. Things that require, the level, I guess, of improvement is kind of as a rule of thumb. If it requires a building permit, it should be included. And there's FEMA guidelines, various technical bulletins and guidelines that have come out that I forget the number or whatever the title of this, but it's a guideline on what should be included in substantial improvements. And there's very little that you can exclude. So it's all kinds of improvements and repairs, including roofing, siding, doors, windows. And from my experience, that's how the town of Madison has always done this, or like I said, at least in the past 15 years. There are some exceptions, and you mentioned painting. One of the things that I've heard at one of these courses that I've gone to for these FEMA and FIP sort of seminars, where they talk about what can you exclude, like painting, for example. The reality is, if you're going to paint your house, you may paint your house yourself. You're not going to get a permit for that. You paint a room, you do it yourself, and you don't come for a permit typically. I don't believe that's how that works. And the guidance that we've gotten is that if you have a project where it's full renovation of a home and you're doing kitchen remodels and bathroom remodels and new tile, and you're also painting as part of that, so painting is an incidental, then you should be including painting in the overall cost of the project. Things that aren't included are exterior amenities, picket fences and things like that are not included. But if it's part of the house or the structure, they are, and that's what the FEMA guidelines say. That's not
What
to
I'm
say that
hearing,
other-
John, is it's
Yep.
very different if it's just somebody painting their house as opposed to doing a substantial renovation, which includes painting.
Right.
And it excludes corrections. It includes repairs to correct code violations. The federal, right?
Right. So there's those are exceptions that you can have. So if it's to correct code violations, those are not included in the cost of the cumulative costs. And then there's
Can you
another.
give some examples of what that might be?
Yeah, this is not my primary area of expertise here, but it's, I mean, it's probably like something that isn't safe. If there's a heating, an electrical component that is not safe and needs to be corrected, then that would be an exception. And the way it's written is that, the exception is just the minimum amount of work necessary to correct the code violation.
Why don't we do this? John, did you have any other substantial feedback, on the document? Because I think what we'd like to do is let's get to Vin. We'll keep you in here,
Yes.
and then we can kind of have a together conversation at the end, including both of you guys as things come up. But I want to kind of keep you rolling here if we can.
Right. Those are my main points that I've had. And like I said, there's not many, and it's centered around really how are we going to administer this, and I want to make sure we're clear on everything. So
Thanks, John.
I'm here for questions.
Yep, appreciate it.
Who would be a good person a person to ask about variances? Would that be Vin?
I think.
Vin? Okay.
Vin, are you out there?
I am here.
Thank you for joining us. Do you want to just give us maybe a summary of your feedback that you submitted to us, and just give us a sense of your reactions to what was presented in the coastal resiliency recommendation on base flood elevation?
Sure. I mean, just what John was just speaking about with costs and whatnot that are included in the total project. It's based on the FEMA P758 substantial improvement reference. So it gives you a list of what is required to be in, the estimate or the total cost of a project. It gets into parts that are, could be like septic systems, a well, some similar stuff like, well repair, items like that don't really, I mean, a well services the house, but the septic system is such a large expense if it goes bad that it's really been out of it. There's many towns that I don't have the list on me that actually include the septic system in it. I think Milford is one of them, and that's why all the houses are on stilts down there, because they kept, they have a 10-year look back period there. So one of the things that I had was I added, using that FEMA reference in the cost definition, I added a few items in there that weren't really listed in there previously, but it was more of a adding to make it a black and white, reference as to what is really included. So there was no gray area. Well, this guy did this, and so forth. So there was no back and forth. So it was pretty straightforward as to what would be required there. So what you're looking at I'm trying to figure out, it doesn't show up very good on my tablet, what I had. When in the substantial improvement portion, same as John, deleting the retroactive period and the 1-year look back period. I had changed it. If the Board of Selectmen decides to go with the 5-year look back period, my wording on that suggestion would be changed to ending the 1-year look back period instead of on like a July 1st of 2023, ending it on December 31st of 2022 and starting the look back period on January 1st of 2023, just for a simplification of administering the flood permits and cost tracking for going forward to the 2028, first 5 years. I think that would be simpler. I know it's a little bit more restrictive than what the CRC had, but just for an administrative portion, that was my thought on that particular item. Let's see. Another one that I had was, again, purely a Board of Selectmen item. Would the designator of the local administrator. Right now, John, town engineer, is doing it, which is it's in our present ordinance. For the most part, John's doing the administration portion of it, and I go out and I do the inspections and make sure that everybody's keeping it, and guidance with the FEMA regulations and codes and whatnot. So just for simplicity, if anything, would be appointing me as the administrator or as the deputy to help with John continue doing that. There's already 28 other towns in the state that use the building official as the floodplain administrator, just due to the infield portion that actually happens. There was trying to remember, there was another one here. It was the construction of where we're going BFE +2. Right now, the building code requires you with BFE +1. That's a given. The additional foot would be, the one suggested by the CRC, adding up to the second foot. There's a couple advantages of that particular item. The biggest advantage is when you're 2 foot up or 19 inches higher than the BFE, your insurance is much lower, which most people don't realize that. So from my understanding that FEMA is supposed to redo a new look back, or not really a look back, the cost and insurance, and possibly raising the rates in October, possibly remapping. I'm not quite sure if raising the additional foot is and presently is a good thing to do, or do we wait and find out what they do? There's only 2 other towns, Avon and New London, that are BFE +2 in the state presently. But again, this is, this is on the Board of Selectmen's plate to go through. And let's see, what else did I have? There was another one that was on, it's like section 5.3.2.1. It's new construction located 25 feet landward of the reach of the mean high tide. Well, obviously you can't build anything closer than 25 feet, but the way that it's worded, if it goes into substantial, so if you have a few structures that we do have that are closer, if they're substantially damaged, this is not allowing the repairing or raising these existing structures. So I'm not, it wouldn't allow them to do that. I don't think you can landlock somebody and say that you can't fix something that was damaged just because you're that close. Maybe just rewording it. But, I mean, all new construction obviously can't be there, but existing structures should be allowed to fix, maintain, elevate in the same location. If especially if there's no other location on their piece of property to do such. And the rest of the stuff was, actually
More details.
Small, to be honest with you.
That's okay, Vin. So maybe I'll just open it up to questions then to the board here, just to ask, either Vinny or John here, what else is coming to mind related to the recommendations and just their expertise in terms of administering it and inspecting?
I'd like to put a hypothetical to Vin and John both. I own a property. I do 45% improvement, right, based on the last reval. And then very shortly after, the reval is redone and the value of the property goes down. It's not unprecedented, right? I mean, the market drives prices up and down. And with that new reval, the work that I did is now in excess of 50%. Am I now precluded from doing anything to my house for the next 5 years or for the duration of that 5 years from when I did the construction? Or does the clock reset?
You want to go?
It's happened once before where the reval, it didn't get to the point where I went over the 50%, but it's happened before where they had to regroup and were unable to do what the next step or what they had planned to do next because of a reval, and the house, dropped like 15, 20 grand. And at the time that was, almost the next entire budget of doing work to the house. So they really had to stop, regroup, and only do minor fixes until, because there was other permits out, they had to do minor items until the previous items had surpassed their 1 year look back period, which allowed them additional funds to do additional work again.
And that would, if my roof developed a leak, I wouldn't be able to repair it, right?
Well, I think that's where you go into the variance item, but I've been there, almost 12 years now. I've never seen anybody ask or even want a variance or even get a variance, because if they're following the ordinance to the T, there are no need for a variance. I'm just thinking that if they go and want, to redo a bathroom, knowing that the roof is going to leak in 2 years, and they spend 15 grand on a bathroom, it's more poor planning. So, you can't not stop, and the variance group would allow them to do that, but it's just a matter of tightening up so that people don't, try to use the system using the variance group, you know?
I have a question for John. John, I'm looking at the appeals mechanism, and I noticed that the suggested language that we presented tonight shows that you are the final appeal. Is that correct?
No, no. I think it's saying the appeals process is if there's a disagreement with the decision of the town engineer or whoever the administrator is. But would not be part of the appeals process or the appeal board.
Okay. John, I know many members of the public are here and have expressed concerns about some of the penalties, on the back end if they're not meeting the ordinance or the code, to the point of misdemeanors and $250 per day for non-compliance. Do you have thoughts? I mean, is that just sort of standard issue? Is that what we do today? And have been chime in on this too. I don't know which one of you guys would best speak to this.
Well, I can chime in, and Vinny can also. That's one of the I didn't talk about that, and that's one of the comments I had in section 9.0, the penalties. The town attorney actually provided looked at this and suggested edits on here, which I included in my memo. So, and it kind of, I think it softens it a little bit. Like there was some language in here about a fine or imprisonment or something.
Right.
And that was struck from the language. And this is all, from the town attorney. I didn't really, my purpose of putting this in the memo is I don't know if the CRC was aware that the town attorney looked at this and raised some comments. So I wanted to make sure that they are aware of this.
And do we have access? I don't know if I have seen the town attorney's actual feedback. Is that something that we can see directly, or did you say it's embedded here? Would we know it's the town attorney's feedback?
I say that in the comments. So what I've done on the document that I provided, there's I took 5 sections and I commented on each one of them below. So the town attorney's comments, as far as I'm aware, just pertains to this one section. And at least those are the only ones I'm aware of as far as edits that were made. And those are right. Those are in my memo, and it says it's section 9. The edits above highlighted in blue are comments from the town attorney.
Okay.
So I see. I'm looking at this. I still see there's a language in there that says maybe a penalty of $250 per day, and then after that it strikes out or in prison for not more than 10 days for each day of violation. And so the language has been tweaked a little bit there.
So is it as I'm looking at this, are your comments in red and the town attorneys are in blue?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just helpful for us to know where they came from.
Yeah.
John, in your opinion, is it necessary to have penalties?
I've never been involved or had to be involved in a penalty in my work here for the town in 15 years. So is it necessary? It may be, I think the town would need to have some kind of recourse if there's a violation. I'm not really the person to provide a professional opinion on what the penalties should be, if there should be penalties and what they should be, you know what I mean? But
what is it today, John? If somebody doesn't comply with the building code, what is the penalty? Or Vin, either one of you guys.
What doesn't comply with the building code, then it would be a violation. But we've only had really one and it didn't even have to go into a violation standard where the one contractor went over what they were allowed to do on a structure, and they ended up raising the structure because they were over the 50% rule. But there was no need, that we met with the guy right away. There was no need to actually issue a violation because they took care of it instantaneously, and it became, it was corrected right away.
Okay.
So that's just because developers are pretty familiar with these requirements?
Most of the guys that are working on the shoreline are very familiar with what's required in the flood zone.
John, we as a community, we volunteered into the NFIP, right? And the part of that is then that the houses in Madison are eligible for the NFIP insurance, right? In other words, they wouldn't be eligible if we weren't participating in the program, right?
That's
and
correct. Yep.
And that participation has strings attached, right? Things that we have to comply with as a town. Have we seen, or could we get, if we haven't seen, what those minimum requirements are, and then what the additions to it that we're doing that are unique to Madison, or above and beyond what that requirement is to be in compliance with NFIP? Is that something we can get?
You can get the federal regulation, which I think came out in 1968. So the FEMA, I'm not sure what it's called, but the National Flood Insurance Program regulations, I think it's section 60.3, which is very, it's much briefer than this. But that's something that might give you a sense for what the minimum requirement is. I think the local ordinances probably have evolved over the years, whereas the federal regulation, for example, it doesn't speak to how you determine market value. It doesn't have the 1 foot of additional freeboard, which is required by the building code. So those are the types of differences I think that you'll see. But that is, that certainly is available. But as far as looking at that and looking at the local ordinance and trying to do a apples to apples comparison might be kind of difficult to kind of look at what could the minimum requirement be to still be a participating community. I suppose there's probably models out there of towns, communities that are more laxed and don't are not as strict.
Yeah, and so I'm reacting in part to the variety and volume of correspondence that we've received that speak to the onerous nature of or as they've described it, the onerous nature of the ordinance, and I'm trying to get my bearings and a point of reference about what we have to do, what just isn't negotiable, and then what is negotiable. So you say I can go get it. I promise you, I don't know how to go get it.
I can find it and send it to you. I can get that. I can send you those requirements. I think one way to get a sense of where this if you compare this to our existing ordinance, which has been around a long time, the primary differences are the look back period, which I realize is significant if you own property on the coastline, and the elevation, the 1 foot of additional freeboard, somewhat significant, but I think the primary difference between this and the existing ordinance that Madison has had for many years is the look back period. Other than that,
And ours is what? How many years is our current look back?
it's just 1 year.
1 year.
So yeah, in any 1 year period of time, you cannot exceed 50% of the market value. So I think to me that seems like the most significant thing. The look back period, and like I've said before, it's not uncommon to go to 5 years. I think that's one of the more common models.
One of the things that that we have done in preparation for our deliberation and conversation is to reach out to Town Council, Ira Bloom specifically, to chat a bit more about, what are the base requirements that we need to comply with, and to better understand what those minimum requirements are for compliance. And so, we're in conversations and hope to get something back in the next week or so here from our town attorney, so that we can make a better informed decision too. We're obviously getting a ton of input from the public as well. So, any other final questions for John and Vin, guys, before we let them go? I know we still have a full agenda here, so.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. I think I just lost the picture here.
Peggy, I will turn the mic back over to you if you want to come back on camera.
Okay, great.
Fancy background too. Nice.
I got it back at least. It's better than looking at the messy spare room. So, all right. So many thanks, obviously, for a very important discussion, and I know the town staff has been working hard on this to give you, as much detail and thoughtful feedback as possible. So, thank you, John and Vinny, on that. So let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is discuss and take action on setting referendum date on the town and school budgets for Tuesday, May 18th, 2021, pending approval of requested funding amounts for the Board of Finance. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, great. And this is, I think, a routine matter that we typically do take this action and to set the referendum date, which has been on the calendar for a while. And obviously, this is subject to the actions taken by the Board of Finance with the final recommended budget. So any questions?
Peggy, not really a question, but maybe an opportunity for clarification. You mentioned earlier the absentee process. Do you have clarity on what that looks like yet, or are we still waiting to get more information on that?
No, the process, the application for absentee ballots is on the town website. And so you can download that now if you wanted to submit your, the town clerk, if everything is voted on, on Wednesday, I think she will be prepared, hopefully by Friday, to send out actual ballots, but don't hold me to that number, because this is, our town charter has a very tight timetable between now and referendum date. It does not allow a lot of wiggle room for the mail. So we do recommend, and I'll be putting this in my update on Friday, that people submit, use the Dropbox. We are allowed to use that for the referendum. The state did allow, Secretary of State allowed the Dropbox downtown. So if you do want to vote by absentee ballot, I would suggest you put in your application for a absentee ballot in the Dropbox, and then also your actual ballot when you receive it by mail. So just to expedite the process.
So important difference from the presidential election, you won't be receiving an absentee ballot application automatically in the mail. This time you're going to have to request it.
Right. You'll have to request it. And then also in-person voting will be available, like it was with the presidential as well. And we'll continue District 1, as I mentioned, at Polson, social distancing, mask wearing, all the protocols that were in place in November, which I think went really smoothly and people felt were safe in terms of voting, will be available for May 18th. But yes, that's a good point to highlight, that don't expect something in your mailbox. You will have to take a step, and I think you can just get it off the website and drop it off or mail it in. So any other comments or questions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, great. So that sets that. Number 8, discuss and take action to approve a special appropriation request from the Department of Public Works in the amount of $500,000 to fund the highway vehicle leasing program, which has been modified to reflect the recommendations of the CCM Highway Vehicle Study conducted in December 2020, pending Board of Finance approval. This action will satisfy all requirements for a town meeting under State of Connecticut Executive Order 7S. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. So just real quickly, this is basically as part of the Board of Selectmen's recommended budget to the Board of Finance, and it was also a part of the Board of Finance's recommended budget, that a special appropriation would be put into the vehicle replacement account so that we can start ramping up our vehicle replacement plan. There was an extensive study. I don't know if other members of the public had attended Board of Selectmen meetings in last December about the state of our fleet, and we recognized we were underinvested in that, and we were also having significant challenges with some of our existing heavy trucks in particular. So we're just taking the step, and so our recommendation was to take $500,000 from the undesignated fund balance and kind of jumpstart our replacement program now once the budget is approved. And so this is just that step that we're taking. Also, timing wise, vehicles are in high demand, and John keeps waving his hands at me in the office about trying to earmark some of these large trucks so that are in dire need of replacement, so that we can get moving on this as soon as the budget is voted on. It's a timely process. And if we waited longer, we might actually have to go through a town meeting process, which it can be quite lengthy with public meeting notices and stuff. And we might not even be able to buy these things until the end of the summer. So that's why we're bringing this here today. And this will be on the Board of Selectmen agenda, or Board of Finance agenda on Wednesday. Any more questions or concerns? I know we've talked ad nauseum at times about the fleet, so.
We have. I think it's probably just worth pointing out that as the 5 of us we're going through the budget and we were looking for ways to be more efficient on the operating side. We recognized that this was an opportunity to take tax money that the town had already collected, and it was sitting unused in the excess fund balance, and put it to use and keep this expense out of the operating budget. I think that it's a great initiative. It also is the beginning of getting this equipment onto a leasing obsolescence program, rather than letting the floorboards rust out before we have the conversation. Well, when the lease is up, we'll be able to have a conversation about disposing of that equipment and moving on to a new piece. So
it'll put us on a timely replacement program, so we don't have any surprises. And we did have to do a lot of special appropriations over the last 18 months on trucks. So any other comments or questions?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. All right, let's see. Item number 9, discuss timeline and process to update the Board of Selectmen policies, including the procurement policy and potential ethics commission. I will real quickly just screen share. I just had some talking points to assist us in this part of our discussion. All right, sorry. Are you able to see this?
Yeah.
Can you see like my whole screen then?
Yep.
I don't know what is going on. I feel like I have gremlins in my computer tonight. So it doesn't show. I don't know what. I don't know.
We can see the slide. It's just we see this. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. No. They did some update to my Zoom, and everything is different today. So that's why I'm having all these issues. All right. So pretty much just for the public's benefit, on the town website, you'll see a link under Board of Selectmen policies. And basically, these are basically the guidelines and day-to-day operational policies that the town works under. And they range over a couple of different things. One is just the administration of town government. So that would include like procurement and property management, technology, fleet management, what we just talked about. There's also a piece that relates to the Board of Selectmen bylaws. And how we accept donations. A lot of times you'll see us voting to accept donations. It also includes employment policies. It also includes our ethics policy. I know we've talked a lot about an ethics commission, but really it starts with an ethics policy. And then, business issues about how we invest funds, use cash, personnel policies, things that oversee public works and retired policies, just a list of what's been expired. And so most of these date back to February 2011. So it's been 10 years since these policies have been updated. And I think in our discussions with Ethics Commission, we've recognized that there's just some things that are frankly wrong in the policies. The current ethics policy appears to have been updated, and it refers to an ethics commission that was never actually charged by the Board of Selectmen and seated. And so there's two things that I wanted to pull out of this, and because we've talked about needing to update the policies, and one is ethics. And so it's looking at our current ethics policy, and then also moving forward on the ethics commission. And both Aaron and I had agreed to work together on that. And we've done some research and we've been working on it. And we hope to come back sometime in May with some recommendations on that. And so it would require some amendments to the ethics policy and then also the ethics commission and how it relates to the policy. The second area is procurement. We actually were fortunate that our regional South Central Regional Organization of Government, SCROG, that we participate in, had some consultants available in the areas of procurement. And so I worked with Stacy Nobitz, and we've reached out to this consultant. They're reviewing our procurement policies and giving us some advice about how to update them, clean them up a little bit. And some of this is just simple things like what types of contracts need to go out to bid, what type of approval processes would be needed. And then the other piece that we don't really have in our procurement policies is any kind of overreaching goals or objectives for procurement. And so we're pulling, I've been working with Stacy. We're pulling together examples of some of the kind of overarching policy guidelines. And then there's the detailed piece of that. When do we have to rebid on things? What's required for an RFP? And so we're going to take what the consultant has kind of suggested to us and examples, kind of work through it, and then come back to this board in either May or June with a recommendation for an update. We can have a discussion and then, hopefully try to update these policies to be more user-friendly and clear. I think there's some ambiguity in certain areas. So those two areas, I know the board has talked a lot, in the past about wanting to, further discuss the ethics commission, and we're actively doing that. And then I just wanted to give you a heads up that procurement will be coming down here. And then I guess, the other thought is are there any other things in here that we might want to move forward as kind of priority number 3? We are talking about fleet management, which is under administration. So that probably needs to be the policy itself kind of adapted to fit some of the things that came out of the study. And so we'll probably come back with some revisions to that. And so I just wanted to kind of provide that update. And then also, I don't know if the board had any areas that, if a member thought, hey, I'm happy to tackle some of the business areas or the personnel policies. I just wanted to throw that out there as an opportunity to kind of, move some of these forward, because ultimately all of these need to be reviewed and updated.
So that actually might be the third thing, is to develop a schedule for review and update, which wouldn't necessarily require a future board to do anything differently other than to do a deliberate review and then update and build that into the policies.
So
You mean in
so
terms
we
of
don't
just
wait 10
having-
years, you mean? Is that sort of the,
Yeah, something like that.
yeah.
That we, and maybe it's just picking 1 or 2 a year and just rotating through.
Yeah, I like that.
I think that's definitely probably a better approach because, you know, it does take some research and time to vet some of the stuff. And I think a 10-year thing, you know, things change and kind of rotating that. So I don't think that's a bad idea. Just trying to put us on some sort of schedule.
With regards to ethics, I think as you guys discuss it, it would be good if we could make the distinguish between conflict of interest and ethics, right? So the section talks about, is titled ethics, but doesn't actually talk about ethics. It talks about conflict of interest. And to me, they're different things, right? And so, and if anybody's wondering why Peggy is recusing herself, it is because of this conflict of interest policy that we've got on the books right now. She's rightly looked at that and says there's a potential, and I need to step back from that conversation. So this is why she's doing that. But I think that they're two different things. I'm not sure that there's really a problem with either one, but it's worth maybe coming up with a definition on what we think ethics looks like.
Well, and I think that the definitions themselves, Aaron and I had a long discussion about that. We're actually looking at how other towns, you know, provide definition around these things. Some are very specific, which I think is always helpful for people, right? Rather than vague and leaving a lot to discretion. And so these definitions for different issues under the ethics policy, I think will be something we'll be coming back to you with thoughts on. And then, you know, I think that the one that's in here, I think came out of the efforts that, you know, Al had originated and Noreen spoke about, you know, a while back, and they got to the ethics policy piece, but then it just never finalized out in terms of the commission, because the commission is kind of where people could go to get an opinion, you know, is this a conflict or not? So this is kind of, you know, so I think that they did spend a lot of time developing what's in here now, but I think it just needs to be updated too. We also have our own experiences that we've been through, you know, to troubleshoot and kind of think through, you know, how we make it clear and well thought out in terms of how people can, you know, use the ethics policy and then also potentially an ethics commission. So there'll be a lot more to come on this, but I did want to tee it up. I know we talked about it a couple of times, and Aaron and I committed to work together. So we have started to do that, and we do have a lot of good information out there to kind of move it forward.
I'd like to also speak in favor of regularly looking at a few policies every year. I think what happened 10 years ago is we tried to look at the entire manual of policies and we got very bogged down.
Just too much.
I think this has to be done in smaller bites. Otherwise, there isn't enough time left to take care of other town business.
Yeah, it's very time consuming, I'm learning. So, okay, so this was just meant to be a kind of short discussion and kind of update you. Any other comments or questions? Okay. All right, great. So, so we'll move on to item number 10, which is an update on beach operations for summer 2021. And this I'll keep abbreviated because tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, I will be hosting with the Beach and Rec Department and the Commission, a public hearing on beach operations for 2021. So it'll be a Zoom meeting. The link is available on the calendar on the website if anybody wants to attend. So I'll just spend a few minutes giving some of the highlights right now of what we'll talk about, just because do get a lot of questions about what it's going to look like this year. I'll just spend a second kind of reminding people that, we took a lot of initiatives last summer because of COVID and the Hammonasset State Park limiting the number of people who could visit the park. I think they were anywhere from 30% to 50% of their total parking spaces were open. And so half the park was essentially closed for parking. And obviously that spilled over into our roads. We all lived through that, and it created an enormous demand for our own beaches. A lot of the policies that we did to kind of keep crowding down and maintain control of visitor flow were done on executive order. So first of all, we cut surf club parking capacity to 50%. We also, and then I think we started adding spots back towards the end of the summer. We limited parking access at our 3 beaches to residents only on weekends and holidays, and that was under an executive order. So that is something that we would not really be able to do this summer. We had beach capacity limits at one point. We were counting the number of people. It was a very difficult process that we went through. And then there was a period of time, because of the double state of emergency that I had the privilege of managing, we did limit our beaches to only residents for a 10-day period. And that was kind of due to the extraordinary circumstances that we were facing at that point. We also added full gate staffing and lifeguards 7 days a week. We implemented a gate at Lowry Field. And then we worked closely with the MPD to come up with some traffic safety items. The chief set up a shoreline police patrol. So these were all things that we did to try to make our summer reasonable and somewhat enjoyable, hopefully, so residents could, enjoy all the amenities that we have. So what does that mean for this year? Well, the good thing is a lot of what occurred last summer partly was primarily driven by Hammonasset. We have been working closely with DEEP, which oversees all the parks in the state of Connecticut, to deal with some of these issues. And it wasn't just last summer, though. We've had issues with Hammonasset really since the Passport to the Park program had been launched, allowing free access to state parks for all Connecticut citizens. And so we've had multiple conference calls, letters that have gone back and forth, as well as more recently a presentation that I gave to the deputy commissioner talking about all our problems, chock full of data. And I think they were very appreciative of actual, here are all the service calls that we have. Here are all the problems we have. Here are all the money that we spend in order to police Hammonasset State Park. And then here's what happens to our town because of the extraordinary visitor traffic that it drives. And so the good news is that they did announce that they are not going to be limiting capacity at state parks this summer. So all parking spots will be open. The COVID testing site that's currently operating there is actually going to be winding down, I think, the first week of May, which is a little disappointing because I think people love the convenience, but they just they want to be fully operational and have the campgrounds operational. And so that testing site will be going away, and everything pretty much is going to be open for public use. And then some other things that they shared with us on a call last week that they're going to be doing. They're going to be sending me a lot more details on this, but and they haven't announced a lot of this publicly, so I'm kind of giving you a sneak peek, but they are going to be adding additional public safety staff inside the park and to help with traffic control outside of the park, which is a huge help for our police department, so that our police department is not having to deal with the intersection at the connector and the park entry. And also they'll be able to respond more readily to events in the park rather than our police force having to come in. So that should help a bit in terms of relieving some of the public safety demands. They're also looking at, and these were some ideas that we had shared with them also, about creating a some sort of public transit options to get to Hammonasset on a bus line. And there's a couple of different ideas being floated around, but they're hoping to put forward. And what that does is it helps people greater access to Hammonasset without taking up parking spaces or congesting the road. So using public transit to get to the park and make it more available to people who don't have access to a car. And then the other thing is we're talking more about emergency response protocols to kind of cut down on the need for ambulance services to respond to calls in the park. So that was all good news that we're working collaboratively and as partners to tackle some of these problems. And then the other thing is Salt Meadow. I know that was a big problem last year. And because of the funding that we received from the state, there were some restrictions about what we can do at Salt Meadow in terms of access to the park. They're very amenable to working with us on that. And we're coming up with a plan about, we're not quite sure if we're going to require stickers to park at Salt Meadow, but somehow being able to deter people from using that as just a parking lot. It was very frustrating last year that the park became overwhelmed with Hammonasset visitors. And then people couldn't go to, enjoy Salt Meadow as a recreation facility by our residents. So we're working on a plan for that. But we do have their agreement that they're going to allow us to put some control mechanisms there. So that to me is a huge deal. And then I won't dig into all this. There's a lot of details about our staffing. We are going to be staffing 7 days a week. Stickers are not going to be required until Memorial Day weekend. We are going to actually add gate staff Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, where people need to just show proof of residency, and that can include last year's beach sticker, because we're concerned that with the nice weather, and this happened definitely last year, that even in May on a good day, we got slammed. And I know and this is just going to be for East Wharf and West Wharf because those parking lots are small. So we're gearing up to have staff those 3 days a week at those gates. The other thing that we're implementing is capping the number of non-resident visitor passes sold on a daily basis. I know one of the big concerns is that Hammonasset gets filled up and then people hop on the highway and they come right to Madison and they flood our beach parking lots and take away parking spots from residents. And so we've actually had conversations internally about what's the best way to approach that. I know a lot of people have had ideas about making it residents only like we did last summer, which we really can't do, but we can limit the number of passes that we sell to non-residents. And we're going to base that on historic sales. And we kind of went through and did a tracking of data and come up with kind of a limit so that once we've sold out of non-resident visitor passes, we can just tell people who turn up that, no more available that day. So we can ensure we have like almost 600 parking spots across our 3 beaches that a majority of those parking spots are going to be used by town residents. So all of this will be kind of talked at in more detail. I just also put on here, we're working with the police department again. We're going to be trying to do a lot of the things we did last summer. And so I encourage everybody, if you want to dig into all these kind of operational issues, we'll be talking about them tomorrow night at the public hearing. So any questions from the board, and you're all welcome to attend. I'm assuming Lauren sent out the invite to everybody, but
yep, we have it.
And that's kind of that. And there'll be, like I said, a further, more detailed discussion tomorrow night. Okay.
A lot going on.
Yeah, it is. It's funny. You think summer and you think, it's time to relax, and it's just the opposite for the town for town staff. So now's when we get really busy. So,
Well, it
so I
sounds
guess
like a lot of great progress with Deep, Peggy. So, congratulations. That's great.
Well, thank you.
Great move. Yeah.
It's been great. They're very, I think just once they really understood, rather than just telling them it's killing us, we actually gave them data and a lot of information, and I think they really appreciated that. They were like, okay, now we get it, and so I think, we're going to continue to track a lot of this summer about visitors, and we were doing tick marks last summer about how many people were coming in and where they're coming. We're going to try to track more of that this summer, so we really have some better statistics too as we go forward. And the Beach and Rec Commission is going to be looking at the entire structure of our Beach Pass program, both the pricing, but also really how we do it and what types of passes we offer. That's going to be for next year. Right now, prices are the same as last year, no changes, people can relax. So, okay, so I think the next item is just, we have a resignation and appointment. So I guess, can I get a motion to accept the resignation of Fred Moore from the Coastal Resiliency Commission?
So moved.
With thanks.
Regret.
Looking at that.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much, Fred, for your service. I know it's the commission has been very demanding, but we really appreciate your serving the town, and we always are appreciative of our volunteers. So all in favor of accepting that resignation, say aye.
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 Okay, great. All right. And the next is, can I get a motion to appoint Mark Casparino to the Salt Meadow Park Governance Committee for a term to expire January 1st, 2022?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. And we welcome Mark to the Salt Meadow Park Committee. And it's perfect time because we'll be hopefully making some interesting changes at Salt Meadow. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, usually, okay, great. All right, thank you, Mark. And then the third appointment is of Kendra Polito to the Salt Meadow Park Governance Committee alternates for a term to expire January 1st, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Kendra, also thank you for stepping up. Appreciate your volunteerism. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. Next item on the agenda is, can I get a
Refunds and
motion?
abatements.
I'll move the tax abatements of $685.67.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, great. And then finally is citizens' comments. Lauren, do we have any citizens raising their hand?
Oh, it looks like a few.
Yeah, they're starting to come in. I will move everyone over. Just a reminder, when you give public comment, to please state your first and last name and your address for the minutes. Emil Geisenheimer is first.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Emil Geisenheimer of 14 Middle Beach Road in Madison. I'm resilience proposal. I want to do this from a sort of personal perspective. Don't mind indulging me. First of all, I have a abiding respect for hurricanes and flooding. I grew up in New Orleans, lived through many hurricanes, including some awful ones like Irma and like Betsy and many others. I've been in Madison in 1982. I've lived through Gloria, Irene, many nor'easters, Sandy, etc. I lived as a full-time resident of Madison for many years. And then when my wife and I retired, we had a business in Madison. When we retired, we bought a condominium in Miami Beach. So we're gluttons for punishment in terms of exposure to water and flooding and hurricanes. I also have the background here for the Air Force and manage flooding projects in northern Thailand to keep U.S. Air Force bases from flooding in monsoons. So I have some knowledge of and experience with flooding and storms. when we bought our home at 14 Middle Beach Road in 1995, I chose to elevate the house. In fact, it was the first house in Madison, to the best of my knowledge, that ever was elevated. In fact, we had difficulty with the zoning to permit it to be elevated as much as I wanted it to be. So, because neighbors were concerned about obstruction of views and the streetscape and issues like that. So we settled for raising it about 3 feet when I wished to raise it at that time about 6 feet. So it's not as though I'm a denier of this problem. I'm intimately familiar with the problem. We've lived directly on Long Island and understand the risks that come along with properties that are exposed to storms and flooding. As a former commissioner of an agency in town, I know the responsibility you bear for making decisions about this important subject, and I feel for you because it's a grave responsibility. I am concerned that if the coastal area management proposal were to be adopted, it would be transformative for the town of Madison in ways that if you were to project yourselves out 10 or 15 years and look back, I think you would deeply regret. We would turn much of our town into Stiltsville. It would lose its charm, its attractiveness, and it would not, and importantly, would not adequately serve to protect the property from sea rise and storms, because the bulk of the damage that's done along the water is not flooding, it's hydraulic pressure, wind-driven waves that destroy homes. Yes, they get flooded from time to time, but flood damage is repairable. Destruction from waves is very expensive. And raising the homes would only increase the sale area, if you will, of the homes and cause them to be more damaged than they might be otherwise. So it's a very delicate balance that you guys have to deal with between complying with the requirements of federal FEMA obligations and state building code, but not going overboard and going beyond what's legally required. Because in doing so, you will simply, in my opinion, reduce the charm and value of real estate along our beautiful shoreline, change the character of the town, and diminish the attractiveness of living in Madison. Thank you very much for your time, and I wish you the best of judgment on this tough issue.
Thank you for your comments. I know a lot of people have strong, opinions. There's also a lot of passion for this issue because it is such a special part of our community, our coastline. So I would ask, if possible, people, if you are going to be commenting, to please keep the comments down to 3 minutes each, just because we want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to be heard. So thank you. Next one, Lauren.
Dee Dee Stone is next.
Good evening. My name is Dee Dee Stone. We reside at 1063 Boston Post Road and also own a home at 99 Middle Beach Road in Madison. First of all, I'd like to say that I categorically agree with Larry Lawrence's earlier comments, as do over 800 signers of our Save Our Shoreline Madison, Connecticut petition. I'd like to make 2 points. I'd like the Board of Selectmen to consider, as related to the proposed amendments, I was concerned at the number of houses that were listed in the report by Coastal Resiliency. They stated it was 150 to 160 homes, and they were fairly adamant in one of the meetings that I observed that they didn't think it was more than that. I thought that number seemed low. So my husband and I took a 2-hour drive yesterday. We started at Circle Beach and went all the way on the west and went all the way to Pent Road on the east, driving up and down every street, lane, and road that led to the water. And we started counting. We did not count any houses that had been elevated. even if we weren't sure if they were high enough. And we made a point of asking neighbors in these neighborhoods where, in their knowledge, the floodplain started. And we eliminated a few border houses, if you will, so that we were erring on the side of conservatism in our number. Much to our surprise, we counted 574 homes that will be affected by the proposed amendments to the floodplain ordinance. Given that Madison has 7,991 residences, if you do the math, it comes out to 7.18% of the homes in Madison will be directly affected by this proposal. I think that's an important point. It's far more than the 150. And the other important point is this is not strictly a Middle Beach West issue. More than half of the homes were located in the Neck Road area. Many of the homes there are more modest, have been in the same family for generations. And I think it would be an enormous hardship for anyone to have to comply with some of the proposed amendments. My second point is post-hurricane of 1938, which we all know was a big one, there was a burn installed offshore of Middle Beach Road. It went roughly from Gull Rock and followed along the shoreline. At extreme low tides, it's still visible. It has not been maintained since then. In 1944 and in 1956, and these are from Army Corps of Engineer reports, there were revetments and quoins which were erected along the shoreline of Middle Beach, which were 70 feet long and 20 feet wide. This cost was in part absorbed by the federal government. And however, the thing that's most concerning to me is that there's been no maintenance or upkeep since 1956 on these revetments or quoins. If you walk along the seawall on Middle Beach and you look down, you see straight down to the water. There is no longer the 20-foot barrier, if you will, to help with any wave action. I'd like to know why the infrastructure hasn't been addressed in 65 years. And I'd like to know why the proposed amendments only are focusing on residential properties that people pay themselves to maintain, either out of their pockets or through their insurance policies. And I believe that the town should be held to the higher standard of being responsible for the infrastructure along our iconic shoreline, much in the same way that they're asking the residents to be responsible for making changes under their proposed amendments. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. Lauren, anybody else?
Kim Brunstad is next.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? I apologize. Kim Brunstad, 15 Texas Road.
Yep.
Thank you. I have 4 points and I will try to keep within the 3 minutes. I happen to be an attorney and some of what was discussed earlier very much concerns me. So I would urge all of you to talk to the town attorney. For example, the discussion of the existing regulations penalties. Just because some of Madison's existing regulations may have draconian penalties, or even other towns may have them, does not mean that the CRC or the Board of Selectmen should enact such draconian penalties with respect to the floodplain ordinance. It's blatantly unreasonable to treat floodplain violators as criminal, charge them with a misdemeanor, and put them in jail for 10 days each for each day of violation, or fine them $250 a day. Even if other towns do that, it doesn't mean that Madison should do that. In fact, FEMA provides for no such penalties. FEMA provides for barring access to the National Floodplain Insurance Plan for noncompliance, or allows for raising premiums, but there are no draconian penalties under FEMA, none. In terms of the variance proposals, even if those types of legislation exists elsewhere in Madison regulations, if you look at those closely, there's no way to allow for any kind of variance. They don't even allow for physical handicaps, which is blatantly illegal, or for financial or economic considerations. to me, there's really no loophole by which anyone could get a variance. And that very much concerns me when I think about someone who may have inherited a family home, or a single mother, or someone who gets hit with a hurricane and has absolutely no recourse. There were some excellent letters sent to the Board of Selectmen, which I really encourage you to look at. One of the realtors, who's very well known and well regarded in town, talked about a house that was currently appraised at $350,000. And she points out that if the proposed changes are implemented, the homeowner would be required to lift the home by 4 feet if they spend more than $175,000 in repairs, maintenance, or upgrades over a 5-year period. Think about that. $175,000 breaks down to only $35,000 a year. To replace the roof and put in a few windows would cost that homeowner $175,000. Right there, they're done. Okay. Then they get hit with a hurricane. Now they have to pay upwards of $850,000 to raise their home. And what's happening, as the same realtor points out, is some of the homes along Middle Beach are they're abandoning them. They just can't afford the repairs. And some of the potential homeowners are backing out of sales. So I think you need to think very carefully, Board of Select people, when you think about this. This is not people failing to plan well or not taking, what repairs will come into play. These are people that are getting hit and only able to do very little repairs per year, and then face tremendous costs that most of us can't afford to raise their homes. I had other comments, but I'll cede to others because I think I'm over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else, Lauren?
John Ford is next.
I didn't do that.
Hi, my name is John Ford. I own property at 57 and 61 Middle Beach Road, which we bought a couple of years ago. It had lain dormant for, 5 to 7 years. It was 2 summer cottages with garages behind them, with living space above each garage. And it laid dormant because no one wanted to pursue the necessary renovation to convert it from seasonal to a full year home. Undo work each winter to try to bring the properties along to a more current status. But we're not done. And each year we use the amount of funds that are available to us under the Madison ordinance to make further improvements. So I think we'll be done under the current rules in about 5 years. If the new ordinance is passed with this 5-year window, it would take us 25, 30 years to have done the work that we did over the last several years. It's just incomprehensible, the burden that you're placing on homeowners to improve their property, because the cost of raising it over the FEMA limit, the base elevation plus 2 feet, not only would these 2 houses, which are twin houses, which are mirror images of each other that were built back in 1917, not only would they be ugly, in my opinion, sitting up on 8-foot stilts, but the cost of these homes to raise them is prohibitive. And so what you're going to have happen is, in the non-improved properties, people won't buy those homes. They'll sit there, they'll never get improved, and eventually some builder will come in, tear it down, and build up a McMansion, which just destroys the character of what we've come to love in Madison. So I fervently hope that you'll seriously reconsider not only the 5-year period, but also the way that you look at market value, which is currently the assessment on the structure in Madison, and seriously consider being able to use third-party appraisals from licensed appraisers in Connecticut. Thank you very much.
Robert Patricelli is next.
Robert, you're
Bob.
muted.
Bob, you need to come off mute.
I'm sorry. Should know that by now.
Huh.
Well, I'm Bob Patricelli, 25 Parker Lane, and my children and I actually own 4 properties in the high-risk flood zone area in the Parker Lane area. I'm what you might call the regulations guru of the petitioner group, and I think I won that job because I used to do that for a living in the federal government, where I wrote regulations and interpreted them for 10 years in a variety of administrations. So I took on the job of diving into the FEMA regulations, first the law itself, which is relatively brief, 3 major sets of FEMA regulations, a 513-page, 205 desk book, which is still the Bible, the 2010 guideline that Vinny referred to, and the 2018 so-called questions and answers. And I can tell you there's lots of room for interpretation in these documents, as there always is. But the big issue is what is required, and Bruce Wilson asked that. Tell me what the minimum requirements are. And we have worked very hard to lay out what the minimum requirements are. And we can tell you that Madison and most Connecticut towns have gone well beyond the minimum requirements. Be very happy to work with the counsel you're using to take him through or her through all of the citations in these documents that show you what's possible. But just very briefly, for example, we talked about market value. Well, this is what is said about market value. Property appraisals that are prepared by a professional appraiser, according to standard practices of the profession, are the most accurate and reliable method for determining market value. I think you heard a little earlier that most everybody uses assessed value. Well, not true. FEMA actually kind of leans in the direction of professional appraisals. Another thing that you hear constantly is that all repairs are covered. Well, FEMA doesn't require that. The word repair does not show up in the federal law, and it only shows up in the FEMA guidelines as having to be included in the substantial improvement test when other things are involved, like material improvements. Then you have to sweep in repairs. This issue is all about, for us, it's all about the requirements imposed on older homes under the substantial improvement test. Kim explained that the violations provisions are not at all required by FEMA. So the town doesn't have to do that. It can just simply deny people access to federal flood insurance, and then they're stuck with it. They have to self-insure. But the issues really are around the interpretation of that 50% rule. And without trying to go into chapter and verse, I can assure you that there's plenty of language that would allow you to cut back on the unnecessary negative impacts on existing homeowners in applying the substantial improvement 50% test. Finally, let me say that we had thought in our group for a time that it wouldn't make any sense for you to make desirable changes until the outcome of the new federal policy ratings were known in October. Well, to our surprise, FEMA published on April 1 the summarized impacts for every state. And I can tell you that they don't have a bearing on the issues before you. In fact, for single-family homes in Connecticut, 6,365 homeowners will see decreases in their policy premiums. Only 1,930 will see increases, and only 6 homeowners we'll see increases of over $100 a month. So there's nothing to wait for in October. And I urge the selectmen to adopt a policy that permits you to enforce the substantial improvement requirements with the minimum of burdens upon existing homeowners. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are running pretty late here, so I just wanted to remind people if there's any more commentators, just to try to keep it under 3 minutes, please. Is there anybody else, Lauren?
There's one more as of right now, Alex Province.
Okay.
Alex, you're on mute. There you go.
Oops. Hi there. Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alex Province from 917 Boston Post Road, and just wanted to mention a few more comments after having listened to the discussion tonight and also the coastal resiliency meeting, I think last week or the week before. First, I appreciate all the hard work that these people have put in, and I know they mentioned the amount of work that they put in, and I hope that's not influencing the desire to get something pushed simply because they have so much time invested in, even though it may be the wrong decision. But specifically as it affects me, they had mentioned the idea that it's a coastal thing. It's houses right on the water. It's houses that get impacted by storms, hurricanes, nor'easters. But I'm actually in a historic house, much like Commissioner Goldberg's screen behind him, on the north side of the Boston Post Road, and am in an AE 12. So I'm in a historic house from 1820, and FEMA wants to make me put this house on stilts that survived the hurricane of 1938. The hurricane of 1955 has never flooded, has never had water in the yard. So we're working with like a flawed map that is changing every year. But in the meantime, or every 5 years, I believe they change. But in the meantime, it cost me a ton of money. And as proven by tonight's discussion, is incredibly complex and has incredible nuances that will take a massive amount of sorting out. And in effect, people like me that own houses that are ready to throw my hands up in the air and just say, this is too much. I'm not going to invest the $1 million it takes to restore this historic house. I'm just going to let somebody else do it or not do it. And I suspect it's affecting my interest in staying in town and will affect people's interest in moving into town. So I think, and I'm sure you guys are very intelligent, smart people, so we'll put the necessary time. But this is serious stuff that has serious implications that may not be felt next year or the year after, but 10 years or 15 years, like the gentleman who spoke before me mentioned, we are going to see an impact of this decision. So I know you guys are taking it very seriously, and I appreciate all your time and with this, but thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay, thank you so much for your comments and sharing your concerns with the board, and for also enduring our entire meeting to get your comments in. So I know it shows true dedication. So I think that's it then, correct, Lauren?
Yep, that is everyone.
All right. Well, I want to thank the public for attending tonight, and with that, I guess can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Second.
All right, tonight.